All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming to my session on writing views handlers. A lot of you guys were in my last session on inheritance, but I'm just going to introduce myself again for those of you that weren't in that session. My name is Tom Friedhoff. I'm a senior software engineer at ActiveLamp. We're a digital agency based out of Los Angeles. Been working with Drupal for the past 10 years, and we're pretty active in the LA Drupal community. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can find me at Tom Friedhoff, or the organization that I work for at ActiveLamp. As we post content on our blog and videos, we tweet that out. And so if you want to follow any of the stuff that we're doing, definitely go check that out. I'm going to plug our YouTube channel as well. As you guys can see, we're filming all three of the sessions that I'm giving this week at SandCamp, and we're going to be posting that on our YouTube channel. So if you guys want to consume this content after SandCamp is over, make sure you subscribe to our channel and you'll get notified when we publish that. Also, we're doing a little highlight reel of all of SandCamp, so definitely go check that out. And so this is an intermediate level talk. I'm not going to be talking about how to use views. So if you're brand new to views, this session is probably not for you. We're not going to go through the UI. The little bit of UI that we do go through will basically be to add the handlers that we create through code, which I'm going to show you guys here in a second. And so basically what we'll be covering today is how to extend views with handlers. And so what a handler is it's basically all the little things that you get within the views UI, like your fields, your filters, if area handlers to be able to put something in the header or the footer, your arguments, your relationships. And so I'm going to show you how you guys can write your own handlers with views. And if you came to my last session, I talked about encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism using Drupal entities. And I touched in that session that writing views handlers is really inheritance. It's just inheriting what already exists in views and extending it. And so if you're brand new to object-oriented programming and you came to that session, hopefully you guys will be familiar with what I'm about to show you. If not, like I said, go check it out on our YouTube channel once we have that published. And so we're going to, for the most part, do a live demo in this session. It's going to be more of a tutorial style session. So we're going to actually code a module. I believe I do have all the code actually in the slides, so I'll go through how you actually code these modules in the slides first, and then I'll sit down and I'll actually do it with the little demo site that I have set up for SandCamp. And so, has everyone in here coded a module for Drupal? Okay, cool. So there's a few people that haven't coded a module for Drupal, so I'll go ahead and go through this. This is for Drupal 7, by the way. But when we get to the views part, like a lot of this stuff will apply to Drupal 8 because views in Drupal 7 is object-oriented, and in Drupal 8, most of the code in there is object-oriented as well. So the concepts you'll learn as far as the views stuff will apply to Drupal 8, but as far as writing modules, this is all Drupal 7. And so there are basically two files that you need to define to write a module, and these are the two files. You need to define a mymodule.info, and that mymodule is just the name of your module, whatever you want to name the module, and then the name of your module.module. And so you can see here, we're going to define a module that has a dependency on views, and then also has a dependency on xAutoLoad. And is everyone in here familiar with PSR4 class autoloading and that whole namespace type thing? So we have a video online that talks specifically about PSR4. Actually, I think it's, there it is. So if you go to our YouTube channel or you go to our website, we have a video called PSR4 class autoloading with Drupal 7. Basically, all of the modern frameworks these days are using this standard, Drupal 8 included. And with Drupal 7 doesn't necessarily use this standard, but if you use the xAutoLoad module, you can use this standard as well. So if this is brand new to you, go check it out on our website, go to our YouTube channel, and see what that's all about. And so we're also going to define a hook. So this is basically the only piece of code that we need in our .module file to tell views that, hey, views, we want to do something, and we're going to use the version 3 API of views. And so we just return an array and say we're using the version 3 API of views. And so what that hook actually does is it tells views that my module is going to do something with views. And what views will do is, if you let views know that your module is going to do something, it will load this mymodule.views.inc file before it calls any hooks. And so if you guys are familiar with module development, really the only code that should go in your .module file are your hooks, right? If you have any code that isn't a hook, you should be including that in some other file so that it's only included when you need it, like through maybe like through a hook menu callback or whatever it is. That way you're not loading all this extra code into memory when you don't need that. And so it's basically what views is doing is it's saying, if you define that you're using my API, I will load this file called mymodule.views.inc, and then I'll invoke the hook to see if you have something in there. And so one of the things that we could have put in this hook down here is it's going to look for that mymodule.views.inc in the same directory as the .module file. If you want to put it in a different directory, like maybe in your /views directory, because you want all your views code in there, you'd basically just define another key here called path, and then you would say where that actually is located. But we're just going to put that file in the root of our module. And so this is a hook views data hook. And so basically what this hook does is it describes to views how you should use my table. And so typically when you define this hook, you're exposing to views how to get data out of your table, right? And so views, if you don't know what it does, it's a query builder, basically. It's a UI to a query builder. And so as you add new tables to your database, any custom tables, and you want views integration, you're going to use hook views data. Now, if you came to my last session, I talked about the entity API module. If you create your new tables as entities, views or entity API will take care of all this for you. You don't need to define a hook views data, because that's what entity API module does. It gives you that views integration for free, the rules integration for free. Typically, when you want to change something with views, when you're using the entity API module, is you're going to use a hook called hook views data alter, and then alter it from there, because the entity API module is actually handling the description of this. And so we're going to look at an example of creating like a pseudo field and like changing the query in views in a second. But the first example that I want to take you guys through is how to write an area handler with views. And so an area handler, if you're familiar with the views UI, it's being able to put something into the header or being able to put something into the footer. And so there are several area handlers that come default with Drupal, where you can just put a custom text in there. But say on one of your views you want to make an API request to Flickr and download the 7 most popular photos and put it at the top of that. You can do that with an area handler and write a class to actually go access that API. And so the way you do this, the way we're going to describe this to views is just like with everything in Drupal, everything is described with arrays in Drupal. And so we're going to return an array to hook views data, and we're going to say, okay, this key is typically the table of what we're describing, but for this particular instance, we're using the views key there, saying that this is going to be global to views because this is a handler. It doesn't specifically associate with a node table or an entity table if you've created an entity. And then we're gonna give this field or this area handler a name, so that can be whatever you want to call it. In this instance, I called it my module area, and then we have a title, we have help. We're translating that, so we have my custom area as a custom area handler, and then this is where we actually define the class. So what we're saying is when we actually use this handler, here's the class on how to handle that handler. And like I said, that's a PSR4 namespace class. So if you want more information about PSR4, go check out our video on that. But basically, the way these classes are defined is how you name it is how you put it into the directory structure in your in your module. So for example, if we were to look at the namespace, we would see that the namespace was Drupal, my module, views, handlers, area, and then some class name. And so basically that coincides with where we should put that into our directory structure in our file system. And we'll look at that here in a second. And so this is what our class actually looks like. And so is everybody familiar? I know we had some people that said that they weren't familiar, but so I guess I've already asked that question. I want to ask it again. This is PSR4 namespacing, basically. We've got a class called myCoolHandler that was in that directory that I just showed you. It's very important that we put the namespace up there. And so this is how you define namespaces in Drupal 8. And if you're using xAutoLoad or maybe Composer Manager, which by the way, we've got a video probably releasing in a week or so on Composer Manager on our YouTube channel. This is how Composer Manager or Drupal 8 or modules with xAutoLoad will find your actual class and autoload it. And so it's important to have that namespace up there, and then we have my cool handler down here. And so this class doesn't do anything, right? It's an empty class. So when we actually get into the code, to make this class actually do something, you would extend it. And so it's going to be something like views, handler, area, right? And so now this class automatically works because we're inheriting everything from the parent handler. And so like I was saying in my last session, if you want to write your own class and inherit everything and just do it for, giggles, then there you go. You can now have your own custom handler that does nothing except for inherit everything from the parent. And you'll see how that looks here in a second once we jump into the code. And so this is how you write every single views handler, right? And so the best way to learn how to write views handlers is to look at the views handlers that you want to extend and then just extend it little by little. You don't have to write very much code. You just look at what something already kind of does and add to it whatever you want to add. And we're going to add to some of the handlers here just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So now it's time to write a custom field. I'm going to jump into the code here because I want you guys to see that actually working. Okay, so I have a little sandbox set up here, and I'm going to turn on my module over here. Okay, so I have this little my module here. And before I turn that on, let me just show you what that looks like, just so you guys can see again. So there's the info file that I just showed you guys. Again, there's the module file, and here's the views.inc file. And so the part that you guys have seen so far is this little section here. And if I look at this handler, we've got this namespace, Drupal, my module, views, handlers, area, my cool handler. And so basically this coincides, and this is the same with Drupal 8 as it is in Drupal 7 with xAutoLoad. Basically you have in your module root, you have a directory called source, and then you follow the rest of this directory structure. So if I open up source, I'm going to go into views, handlers, area, and then there's my cool handler. And so I'm going to comment this out. Actually, I'll just get rid of it. And so this is basically what we had in the slide. And so it does nothing except that it extends views, handler, area. Anybody use PHP Storm or any type of IDE? So this is where IDEs are awesome. Like I can start typing in my views handler, or like back here I can type in, like I know it's a views area, and it's going to give me the different handlers I can extend. I'm going to just extend the area handler for now, but autocomplete is awesome. So definitely look into using a IDE if you're not using an IDE, because it just makes coding so much easier. So this handler doesn't do anything yet, but I just want to show you guys that it actually works. Okay, so if I enable this module, actually, I'm going to enable a views UI as well, so you guys can see it working. Okay. So now I'll go over to structure. I'll add a new view. Let's call this SandCamp. Continue and edit. And so we created an area handler. And so you use area handlers in the header or the footer. And so we'll just hit add here. And you can see here's my custom area. Makes a cool API request or something. And so if I go back here, my custom area makes a cool API request or something. I'm going to use that and then display even if it has no result. And you can see with the basic area handler, we get this little label form here. We didn't have to do anything for this, and now we have area handler in there. So if I save this and then view that page that we just created. And so there's not, I mean, these are nodes that I've created for a demo that I'm going to be giving tomorrow, but like that area handler isn't actually showing here. It's not, it doesn't really do anything. And so I'm going to actually put something into that area handler so you can see that it actually works. I'm just going to override the render method. And so here we're just going to say return hello world. And so you can see that area handler is actually there. We just overrode the render method. And so that's pretty cool. So that render, like if you needed to make like an API request somewhere, one of the things that you could do is say, like this, get something, oops, and then define maybe a private function called get something. And then put your API logic within there, and it would just return that through the render function. So that's the basics of really creating a render or a views handler. All right. So one of the other things that you can do as well, and I had this in here earlier, is you can override. Let me actually go to the views handler here, the parent class there, and so this is the handler that we're actually overriding, right? And so if you need to change anything in here, this is where you start where you're writing handlers. You basically look at the parent class, and whatever you want to change, you just override that, right? And so you can see that the parent class defines 3 basic types of properties, or what they call definitions in views. And we have an options form that, as you guys saw, it had a field for a label, it had a checkbox for an empty. And so I'll just show you guys as an example what that actually looks like if we wanted to add some sort of data to that configuration screen. We'd just come in here and we'd override the method options form. And that's not it. There it is. And so by default, the IDE basically calls the parent options form. And we want to keep that because we want to make sure that everything that's in the parent still gets called. We just want to add our own form field in here. And so we can call this something. Oops. And that's going to be a form array. And we'll say that this is a text field. And the title is some text field. Cool. And so basically we're just adding a form field called something, and we're calling the parent options form. There's one other, for this to actually work, there's one other thing that we need to override with views, and that's the options definition. Because once we put it in there, then views will, let's just do def, and there's option definition. Once we put that in there, views will just persist that as we use it. And so just like we saw here in this views area handler, if I go back to that, the option definition looks like this. It's calling its parent, and so we could just basically copy this code right here. And we would do the same thing here. So get the options from the parent, and then let's add something. I think that's what I named. Yeah, it's down here. So that's what I named the field here. And we're going to say that the default is hello world. Cool. All right. So now if we go back to the views UI, and we edit this, you're going to see there's my some text field. I guess it doesn't like that default, but then we can put something in here. Hi, SandCamp. All displays. Save that, and let's just see if it persisted. Hopefully it worked. It didn't work. Oh, I know what it is. There's no default value on it. So in the form API thing, little form field that we created, we didn't put the default value in there. Told you it was something simple. All right, so now if we go back to this, there it is. This is a test.
That would have been obvious to me at home, so thank
Yeah, no problem. Cool. All right, so let's go back to here. All right, so that was an area handler. So now we're going to do a custom field. But rather than do like a real custom field, I'm going to do what's called a pseudo custom field. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're using the Entity API, you don't really need to write this stuff for your fields because the Entity API takes care of that. But there are times where you want to create pseudo fields. There are times that I want to create pseudo fields, so that's what I'm going to show you guys how to do. But it's basically the same concept if you're doing this to describe your own database tables. One of the things that I want to mention as well with the Entity API, and I know this session's about views, but if you're defining any tables, any new tables that hold any type of data within Drupal, even if you don't want a UI on it, you should probably define those tables as entities, and they could just be headless entities. And the reason why you want to do that is, what's that?
You get all the goodies.
You get all the goodies. Yeah, you get all the CRUD operations, all the create, read, update, and delete operations on there, and you can access your data using the actual Drupal API rather than writing your query statements. Or what I'm going to show you guys here is how to create a pseudo field, because sometimes you need to create a pseudo field, and so I've got a arbitrary example that hopefully demonstrates how this could be good, and so we'll get into it. So this is how you describe fields on a table, and so I'm just going to jump to this code back over here since I have it open. And so if I go into this file here, so here's our hook views data again, and so this is how you describe fields on a table. And so like I said earlier, that first key is actually the name of the table that you're describing, and so we're basically adding another field to this table. We're describing another field to this table to views. So this field here, my custom field, what views will do by default is it'll actually look for that column on the node table, but that column isn't on the node table. So if we don't add this little key right here called real field, saying that we're really talking about the created column, when you use this handler in views, it's going to give you an SQL error saying, I don't know my custom field. It's not in the schema. And so deep down inside of views, they have this little property called real field where you can tell views that this pseudo field is really the created column on the node table. And so just like the area handler, we're giving this custom field a title, giving it some help information, and then we're saying that really use the created field on the table. And then here's our little field handler here, and we're saying use this class here. And so this is basically the way you create all the handlers for views. So for example, if you want to create a contextual filter, you would say arguments, right? Because that's what they're called in the Views API. That's what they used to be called back in when Views first came out in 4.7 and 5. And I think with Views 2, they renamed arguments to contextual filters. However, in code, we still call them arguments. If you wanted to create a relationship, you would do it something like this. And then, define your array like so, with your handler in there. We're not going to look at those today because they're very similar to what I'm going to show you here in a second, which I'm going to show you the field handler and then also the filter handler. But we're defining a field handler here, and we're saying use this myCustomField class here. And so if we, again, look at this directory structure, views handlers field, that class is going to be located here. And so there is our custom field. And it doesn't do anything. I've already demonstrated that it'll just inherit everything from views handler field. So I'm just going to overwrite the render method. And basically what I'm going to say, and so this is one thing that's nice about views is everything is inherited basically in views. Views starts at the highest level with what's called the views object. Then it goes to the views handler object, and then we have all the handlers that extend views handler. And so it's the entire model is all inherited. So basically this get value, this is somewhere up the chain, probably like 4 classes up to actually get the value for this particular field. But what we're doing is we're passing in the values to the render array. Views knows how to handle, or passing the values into the method. Views knows how to handle this, and we're gonna just get the actual value for this particular field that we're talking about, which in this case is the created column, because we told views that we really mean the created column. And what we're going to do is, as you guys know, if you're familiar with the node table, the created column is a Unix timestamp. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, render this as year, month, day instead of the Unix timestamp. This isn't the way to do this. This is just an example. There are field formatters within that actual field, so you can actually select that through the UI. But for demonstration purposes, this is what we're going to do. And so if I go back over here and I change this view to show fields. And so for all the nodes, I want to show the myCustom field that I created. And so there it is, showing how to write fields at SandCamp. And so it extends everything that comes with views. All we did was override the render method. And so now if I save this and then view the page, there you go. So now we're showing a view of fields. There's my custom field. And now it's taking all those timestamps and showing them as dates. Cool. Any questions so far? Pretty cool stuff. Is this new stuff to you guys? Have you guys seen this before? Cool. All right. So let's move on. All right. So just showed that. So now let's write a custom filter. And so this is where writing your own handlers really becomes handy, right? And so the example that I'm going to show you guys is, what if you want to pull out just the even or odd timestamps for that? You can't do that without writing your own handler. I mean, I don't know of any other way to do this without writing your own handler. And I'm going to show you how little code you have to write to actually do that. That's not a large task. And so basically, we're going to go into the myCustom filter. And so let's just jump right into the code. So again, as review, filter, here's myCustom filter. I'm going to open up that class. And so here's my custom filter. It extends views handler filter. And so basically what we're doing here is we're going to define another property called even odd. We're going to default that to odd. And then here's that form, similar to what I showed you guys earlier. We're just going to define another form field on the options form for this filter. It's going to be radio buttons. It's going to be even or odd. And I didn't forget the default value that time. That's what happens when you prepare and don't do live demos. You make sure it works. And then you have your options, odd or even. And then, of course, we're returning that. And then we have one more method here called the admin summary. That's basically what you're going to see in the views UI when you set one of these options. And so if it's even, I'm going to say just even numbers. If it's odd, or if it's not even, just odd numbers. And so I'll show you that here in a second in the views UI. But this is where all the magic happens, right? We're going to modify the query. And so with views, everything is object oriented. You'll have to actually open up the classes and see what's available to you in these classes. But views has this method on the query object called add where expression. And so basically, all I'm doing is I'm setting a complex where clause to this, saying, and so like the first option is just like the query group. If you were to group this stuff, don't worry about that. This is where the actual magic is happening. I'm saying node, because we're working with the node table, node created, give me the remainder of it divided by 2, right? And the operator, we're actually doing a little logic here, saying that if we're looking for even numbers, then when we divide that timestamp by 2, it should be equal to 0. And if we're looking for odd numbers, then it should be greater than 0. It should be 1, basically. And so let's actually see this in action. We'll go down to filter, my custom field. And so there it's defaulting to odd, and I'm going to say just give me numbers. And then I'm going to save this. And before I actually show you guys the results, let me just go back to my field handler and comment this out so you can actually see the real timestamp. And so now if I view that page, so now we're seeing just the even. And so that's the power of views. You can basically do whatever you want with very little code, basically using an inheritance. Just change whatever it is that you want to change. And so it's the same thing with relationships. If you want to do some complex joins with other tables, like there are a lot of times where views out of the box just doesn't do a join the way I like it. And so you'll have to write a new relationship so it does the join exactly how you want it. Same thing with contextual filters, you use the arguments. But you don't have to use these hook pre-render, views pre-render, or all these other hooks that allow you to modify the data after the views system has already executed the query. Like just make views do it. That's why views was designed this way, to be pluggable and to be able to extend it. Okay, so that's basically all I have to show you guys. But I just want to mention that you can override sort handlers. So if you need to sort something a different way. For the esports site that we built, I don't remember how, oh, that's right. We had a special way, the way teams were ranked for that league, they had a special way that they actually scored their points. And so we had a view that basically showed the rankings for those teams, and we had to write a special sort handler that basically looked at those points in a different table. And so yeah, you can write your own sort handler and just do that all through the views UI. Arguments handlers, those are the contextual filters. And then the relationship handlers, those are your joins. And I'm just going to shamelessly plug again our YouTube channel. We're recording this. So if you guys want to catch this content afterwards, definitely go subscribe to that. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to take them. I'm also in Pound Drupal LA quite often. So if you guys or ever want to ping me or chat or whatever, you can hop in there. There's a group of probably about 10 people that hang out in that room, the LA crew. So you can find me in there or send me an email. Cool. All right. Well, thanks, guys.